I found the letter duct taped to the side of my RV, not in an envelope, not in the mailbox. Duct taped like some angry raccoon had a vendetta against fiberglass. It was printed in bold red ink, all caps, with a signature that read Veronica Nels, HOA Secretary. My name's Darren McCaffrey. I'm a retired fireman, and after 30 years of running into burning buildings, I figured I earned the right to park my RV in my own damn driveway. I wasn't breaking a single law, or so I thought. The letter accused me of extended vehicle storage, visual blight, and get this, lowering neighborhood standards. It demanded I move the RV within 72 hours or face a fine of $500 per day. I laughed out loud. Because here's the kicker. Our street, Sycamore Ridge Lane, isn't even under the HOA. I bought this house 10 years ago specifically because it wasn't part of their ridiculous little kingdom. The HOA covers the next street over Sycamore Ridge Circle. Different street, different jurisdiction. And trust me, I double-checked before I signed the mortgage papers. Now, I thought maybe this was a mistake, a clerical error. So I walked over to the HOA office the next morning, letter in hand. The door was open, and I was greeted by the sound of someone typing like they were trying to break the keyboard. "Excuse me," I said. "You sent this to the wrong house." A woman in her late 50s looked up at me over her glasses. Blonde bob, pearl necklace, pink cardigan, she had the full Karen starter pack. "You must be Mr. McCaffrey. We've received complaints." "From who?" I asked. "We don't disclose that information," she said, folding her hands. "But Sycamore Ridge is part of the Greater Sycamore Community Association, and RVs are not permitted in driveways." "No," I said. "Sycamore Ridge Lane is not in your association. Only Sycamore Ridge Circle is." Veronica's lips tightened. "We've expanded the boundaries." "Really?" I raised an eyebrow. "Because I haven't signed anything. Neither has anyone else on my street." She stood up suddenly, as if height could make her right. "You'll need to move the RV within 72 hours. Further non-compliance will result in escalating fines and possible legal action." I left before I said something I'd regret. But I wasn't done. Back at home, I pulled out my original property documents, the neighborhood zoning maps, and even the county plat records. I also called my buddy Glenn, who used to be a city planner. He confirmed it. Our street was never included in the HOA, never voted in, never annexed. Veronica was bluffing, but she wasn't done either. The following week, 3 more of my neighbors got similar letters. One for a basketball hoop, another for a garden shed, and the last one seriously for having a flagpole that was too tall. All with the same threat of fines. That's when we decided to fight back. It started with a group text from my neighbor, Eddie, the one with the flagpole. He's a retired Marine, runs a small engine repair shop out of his garage, and doesn't take kindly to threats. He sent a photo of his letter, then wrote one sentence underneath it. "Time to bury these clowns." By dusk, 8 of us were packed into my garage. Eddie, his wife Linda, the Rodriguezes from across the street, a school nurse named Tasha, the Bakers with the basketball hoop, a quiet college student named Amir, and me. Everyone had gotten a letter. Every one of them used the same phrasing, same red ink, same bogus threats. The only difference was the supposed violations. Eddie set the stack of letters on the workbench and jabbed a finger at them. "That's not enforcement," he said. "That's intimidation." Amir pulled up the county assessor's map on his laptop. It showed the clear boundary where the HOA's jurisdiction ended right at the bend that separated Sycamore Ridge Circle from our street. He zoomed in and out, cross-referencing it with parcel data. "No annexation filings," he said. "Nothing in the last 2 years, nothing voted on, no public notices. It's legally impossible for them to extend their authority over us without a majority vote from affected homeowners and municipal approval." Tasha leaned forward. "So what are they doing?" "Just pretending they run the whole neighborhood and hoping we cave." "Looks like it," I said. "But it's not just about the RV anymore." Linda held up her phone. I called their office today and recorded it. Some guy named Brent told me if we didn't comply, they'd start reporting us to collections. He said it like it was routine. I took a breath, then looked around the room. We need to make this official. The next morning, we formed what we called the Sycamore Ridge Lane Alliance. Amir volunteered to be our record keeper. Eddie would handle contact with the county. I'd take point with legal research. Everyone else spread out to gather statements from neighbors who'd gotten letters and didn't come to the meeting. We weren't just defending our right to park an RV or fly a flag. We were calling out a rogue board for impersonating authority. By Friday, we had 23 affidavits from neighbors who received letters. 15 of them had already paid fines to avoid trouble. But here's where it went from shady to criminal. One elderly couple, the Harlows, had paid over $3,000 for violations ranging from a cracked retaining wall to their mailbox being non-standard. They were never told that the HOA didn't have jurisdiction over them. I stopped by the Harlows' house in the afternoon. Mr. Harlow answered the door wearing a faded John Deere hat and a confused expression. "I thought they were legitimate," he said. "Kept saying we were part of the extended community and threatening liens. They can't place a lien without a recorded covenant," I told him, "and there's nothing on file." His hand trembled slightly as he handed me a stack of receipts. The payments had been made out directly to the HOA's general fund. No itemized breakdown, no invoice numbers, just vague descriptions like compliance remediation. That was the tipping point. We weren't just dealing with overreach, we were looking at fraud. I called my old friend Rachel, who's now a deputy city attorney. I didn't expect her to represent us, but I wanted her perspective. I gave her a rundown of what we'd found: fabricated fines, fake authority, and now misappropriated payments. "If what you're saying is true," she said, "you're not dealing with a civil matter anymore. That's criminal extortion, possibly wire fraud, depending on how they collected those payments." She gave me the name of a county investigator who handles municipal and zoning fraud. By Monday morning, I had a meeting with him scheduled, and we delivered a binder full of documentation. Letters, maps, payment records, and transcripts from recorded calls. He listened carefully, flipping through the evidence without a word. "No annexation filings," he eventually said, tapping the map with his pen. "No vote, no notice, no legal basis. If they collected money under the guise of enforcement, that's criminal misrepresentation." "What happens now?" I asked. He nodded toward the door. "I'll be paying Miss Nell's a visit this week, quietly at first, but I'll need statements." That night, we held another meeting in Eddie's garage. This time, we had over 30 people. Word had spread, and more folks came forward with stories, threats of collections, bogus violation photos that clearly weren't their homes, and in one case, a contractor who'd been told he couldn't work on a home without HOA approval. I stood in front of the crowd and told them what the investigator had said. I wasn't trying to rile anyone up, but I didn't hold back either. "This wasn't a misunderstanding," I said. "They knew exactly what they were doing, and now that the county's involved, we're not just defending our rights, we're exposing a racket." The following morning, something strange happened. The HOA office was locked, no lights on, no cars out front. A hastily taped sign on the door read, "Closed for renovations." But we weren't buying it. Eddie, who never travels without a GoPro mounted to his dash, parked across the street and waited. 2 hours later, a man in a suit who we later learned was Brent, the board treasurer, showed up with a large duffel bag and went inside. 15 minutes later, he came back out, duffel now visibly heavier, and peeled out of the lot. Eddie got the whole thing on video. We sent the footage to the investigator. 2 days later, a county audit team arrived at the HOA office with a warrant. That same afternoon, 2 board members resigned. Veronica Nels did not. Instead, she doubled down. She sent out one final letter, this time certified mail, to every home on Sycamore Ridge Lane. It was written on official-looking letterhead with a gold embossed logo. It claimed that we were mistakenly omitted from the original community charter and would be subject to back assessments for the past 5 years. The total? Over $8,000 per household. People were furious. Linda was so mad she accidentally crushed her phone case in one hand. Mr. Harlow nearly had a panic attack until I explained what we were going to do next. We marched those letters straight to the investigator's office. He opened one, read it, and let out a low whistle. "She's digging herself in deeper," he said. "This isn't just fraud anymore. If she's sending these through the mail, it could elevate to mail fraud." That week, a temporary injunction was filed against the HOA. They were ordered to cease all communications with non-member residents and freeze all collections activity. Every letter they'd sent was now potential evidence. And the audit team? They found over $60,000 in unaccounted funds, but Veronica still hadn't been removed. I didn't understand why until Amir discovered something in the HOA's bylaws. A clause buried on page 22. Board members may only be removed by a 2/3 vote of participating members in quorum. In other words, the very people they were defrauding couldn't vote them out because we weren't legally part of the HOA, but we found a workaround. Eddie knew a guy who ran a local news blog. Nothing flashy, but enough reach to get attention. Within 24 hours, the story was trending. HOA accused of fraudulently fining non-members facing county investigation. The comments section exploded. Former residents shared stories. Contractors chimed in. A few folks from Sycamore Ridge Circle even joined our next meeting to say they were just as disgusted, and that's when something unexpected happened. A whistleblower, a woman named Carol, who used to serve as the HOA's bookkeeper, reached out to us anonymously at first. But after seeing how deep the investigation had gone, she decided to come forward fully. She confirmed that the board had been padding their budget for years, creating fake line items like neighborhood outreach and aesthetic enforcement. Most of the money was redirected into a private account under Brent's name. At the next county hearing, Carol testified. So did Mr. Harlow. So did I. Veronica sat there in her pearls and pink cardigan, acting like she was attending a charity brunch. But even she couldn't hide her expression when the investigator laid out the paper trail on the overhead projector. By the end of the hearing, the board was officially dissolved by court order. Charges were filed against Brent for embezzlement and wire fraud. Veronica, she was indicted for criminal impersonation and mail fraud, and our street, we were declared entirely independent. Officially, publicly, permanently. The day Veronica was formally charged, a police cruiser pulled up to the HOA office just as she stepped out in a navy blue pantsuit and heels that clicked across the pavement like she still believed she was in control. 2 plainclothes detectives intercepted her before she reached her car, one of them calmly presenting a warrant while the other opened the rear passenger door. She asked if this was really necessary. The detective didn't answer. He simply gestured toward the cruiser. From across the street, we watched it all unfold from behind the tinted windows of Amir's SUV. He filmed the arrest without commentary, just the quiet sound of his camera humming as it zoomed in. Veronica hesitated before getting in, eyes scanning the street like she expected anyone to rush to her defense. No one did. When the door closed behind her, Amir lowered the camera and looked at me. That's the last time she walks out of that office like she owns it. By that point, the county had appointed a temporary administrator to oversee whatever remained of the HOA's records. The files were a mess, paperwork jumbled in storage bins, receipts missing dates, payments logged under vague names like community support funds. The administrator, a no-nonsense woman named Marlene with a background in municipal accounting, called it one of the worst cases of mismanagement she'd ever seen. She met with us in a small conference room at the town library where we brought in copies of every document we'd collected. "You folks did more groundwork than most full-scale investigations," she said as she flipped through the binder. "But this goes beyond rogue finds. There's an entire second ledger here. These weren't just enforcement letters, they were part of a money funnel. Tasha leaned forward. To what end? What were they actually doing with it? Marlene slid a photo across the table, printed from a bank statement seized during the audit. A wire transfer from the HOA's account showed a direct deposit to a private holding company registered in Nevada 1 that, according to the county's legal team, didn't provide a single service to the community. No landscaping, no maintenance, not even record keeping. It was a shell. They were laundering member dues, Marlene said. And they used the fake violations to generate slush income. That money never touched a sidewalk repair or a streetlight. Rachel, who'd stayed in contact since the initial report, sat in on the meeting as an official observer. When she saw the transfer document, her face lost all expression. "This isn't just fraud," she said. "This is organized misuse of public trust. If they used the mail or electronic communications, we're now looking at federal charges." The next day, officers returned to the neighborhood not with sirens but with subpoenas. They collected devices, searched storage units, and even took possession of the HOA's official laptop, which had been found under a stack of expired pool passes. Inside were email chains between Veronica Brent and a third board member named Harold, discussing how to expand the boundary narrative and generate compliance revenue. One message, time-stamped 3 months before the first RV letter, read, "Start with McCaffrey. He's visible and stubborn. If he folds, the rest will follow." I sat back in my chair when I read that. It wasn't enforcement. It was a hit list. That same week, we received word from the county prosecutor that Brent had accepted a plea deal. In exchange for reducing his charges, he'd turned over access to the private accounts and, more crucially, voice recordings of board meetings. Eddie played one of them on his Bluetooth speaker for the group. The conversation was muffled but clear enough to make out Veronica's voice. "They'll never push back," she said. "Half these people don't even know how HOAs work. A few red letters, a couple threats of liens they'll pay, we just keep it vague. Community cohesion, property value, the buzzwords sell themselves." Linda leaned against the wall, arms crossed, her jaw tight. "They thought fear made people easy," she said. "They never considered what happens when people get angry instead." The county assembled a formal restitution process for residents who'd been wrongfully fined. Marlene coordinated with local banks to verify payments, and people who had receipts were added to the first wave of reimbursements. The Harlows were among them. Their refund check arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, delivered by a courier with a notarized apology from the county council. When I walked over to see them, Mrs. Harlow was sitting on the porch, holding the envelope with both hands like it might vanish if she blinked. "I thought we'd never see this money again," she said. "I didn't even know it was possible to fight back." "You're not alone anymore," I told her. "None of us are." Meanwhile, the city council held a public forum to address the broader issue. Residents from across the region showed up, some holding signs, others just looking for answers. The meeting lasted 4 hours. People spoke about intimidation tactics, unexplained fees, and the overwhelming legal maze that made it hard to push back. Amir stepped up to the microphone and held up a copy of the zoning map he'd used to disprove the HOA's boundary claim. "This isn't just about mail fraud or embezzlement," he said. "It's about the assumption that nobody will question authority, that fear will keep us quiet. We proved them wrong, but we need protections in place so this never happens again." The crowd applauded. A motion was introduced that night to create a municipal oversight board for HOAs, one with the power to audit finances, verify boundaries, and enforce transparency. It passed unanimously. The fallout from the investigation continued for months. Veronica's trial was scheduled for early spring, and the prosecutor confirmed she'd face multiple felony counts, including criminal impersonation of a public official and conspiracy to commit fraud. If convicted, she was looking at serious time. But for us, the real victory came quietly. With the HOA dissolved and the fraudulent charges reversed, Sycamore Ridge Lane began to feel like a neighborhood again. People waved more. Kids played basketball in the baker's driveway without glancing over their shoulders. I even added a small deck to the side of my RV and started hosting weekend barbecues. One Saturday, as we grilled burgers under a string of patio lights, Eddie raised his glass. "To stubbornness," he said. "And to knowing when someone's feeding you a pile of garbage." We all laughed, but the meaning wasn't lost on anyone. Later that night, as I walked back to the house, I passed by the spot where I'd first found that threatening letter taped to the RV. The duct tape residue had long since faded, but I remembered every word, every demand, every lie, and now it was nothing more than a memory of what happened when power met resistance and lost. The next morning, a new mailbox went up at the end of the Harlow's driveway. Amir helped install it, stronger and better anchored than the last. As they tightened the final bolt, Mrs. Harlow stepped out with a tray of cookies and a smile that didn't carry the weight it once had. "You know," she said, offering the plate, "this might be the first time I've felt like I actually live in a community." We took the cookies, shared a few stories, and watched as the sun broke over the rooftops of a street that had finally earned its peace the hard way. The trial began under a pale gray sky that matched the mood of the courthouse plaza. A quiet crowd had gathered: neighbors, former HOA members, a few curious reporters. I sat beside Rachel in the third row, hands folded, jaw tight. I wasn't there for revenge. I was there because people like Veronica had counted on no one showing up. The prosecution opened with a calm, deliberate tone. They walked the jury through the fake boundary claims, the collection of unlawful fees, and the internal emails discussing how to target specific residents. But what landed hardest was the voice recordings. When the jury heard Veronica refer to homeowners as low-information liabilities, a few of them visibly shifted in their seats. Brent, now a cooperating witness, wore an ill-fitting suit and looked 10 years older than the last time I'd seen him. On the stand, he admitted he'd helped draft the threatening letters and fabricated the map overlays used to justify the boundary expansion. "She said nobody would check," he told the court. "She said by the time anyone figured it out, we'd be sitting on enough in the reserve account to cover legal fees and then some." The judge asked him why he'd gone along with it. "I didn't think anyone would fight back," Brent said, eyes down. The courtroom murmured until the bailiff called for silence. Carol, the former bookkeeper, testified next. She'd brought ledgers, emails, even a copy of a PowerPoint presentation Veronica had used internally, titled Assertive Compliance Strategy. One slide showed a picture of my RV with a red circle around it, and the words "visibility equals leverage." When my name came up, the prosecutor asked if I'd be willing to take the stand. I hadn't planned on it, but I said yes. I kept it factual. I described the letter, the zoning map, the meetings in Eddie's garage. I explained how we discovered the Harlows had been intimidated into paying thousands. I ended with a single line. They didn't just break the law, they broke trust. And they did it with a smile. After I stepped down, the defense tried to minimize the damage. Their attorney argued that the board had acted under the belief that the neighborhood was part of the association due to a clerical misalignment with the original charter. But the emails, audio, and financial transfers told a different story. The jury didn't take long guilty, on all counts. Veronica was sentenced to 7 years. She didn't say a word as the verdict was read, no apology, no justification, just a stiff nod before the bailiff led her away. Harold, the third board member, took a plea deal shortly after and agreed to repay a portion of the misused funds. Between the restitution order and asset seizures, the county recovered over $80,000. That should have been the end of it, but the fallout rippled further. The city council fast-tracked the implementation of the HOA Oversight Board. They appointed Marlene as its first lead auditor. She wasted no time. Within 2 months, 3 other associations in the county were placed under review. She called our case a blueprint for accountability. Back on Sycamore Ridge Lane, things changed in quieter ways. The Rodriguezes started a weekend food co-op, hosting outdoor potluck dinners at the edge of their wide driveway. Amir ran a small tech workshop out of his garage, teaching kids how to solder and build Raspberry Pi projects. Eddie organized a local repair day where anyone could bring broken tools or appliances and get them fixed for free. One evening, Tasha hosted a movie night with a projector against her backyard fence. As the opening credits rolled, I found myself sitting next to Mr. Harlow. He looked healthier, more relaxed. His cane rested against the chair leg, but he didn't grip it like he used to. "I got a letter last week," he said, voice low. I turned to him. "Not from the HOA," he added with a grin. "From the county. Said we were part of a community task force now, helping design a public awareness campaign." "That's a first," I said. He laughed. "Feels good to be useful again." Across the yard, Linda and Carol were stacking plates. They'd become close since the hearings. Turns out Carol had been quietly returning small amounts of money to residents over the years, doing what she could without tipping off the board. She was the one who'd slipped the Harlows a grocery gift card during the worst of it. When I asked her why she didn't leave the job sooner, she'd shrugged. "Sometimes it's better to stay where you can do the most damage to the rot," she said. With the fraud exposed and the false debts erased, the county issued a formal declaration. Sycamore Ridge Lane was never, and had never been, under HOA jurisdiction. The document was framed and hung in our community center, a concrete former storage shed that Amir helped wire for electricity. At the annual town fair, they held a quiet ceremony to honor the residents who'd helped uncover the scheme. Tasher received a Civic Integrity Award. Eddie was given a ceremonial key to the city. I was handed a plaque shaped like a mailbox, with the words "Persistence is proof" carved across the front. Later that night, as I packed up the folding chairs from the fairgrounds, Rachel found me near the parking lot. "You know," she said, "you could have walked away and just parked the RV somewhere else." "Wouldn't have fixed the problem," I said, lifting one of the chairs into the truck bed. "No," she agreed. But stopping it from happening again, that did. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the canopy tents still standing along the grass. Somewhere in the distance, a child's laughter carried through the air. Rachel paused before turning to leave. "They assumed you wouldn't fight," she said. They were wrong. I drove home with the windows down. The streetlights on Sycamore Ridge Lane cast long, warm shadows across the yards. No more letters, no more threats. Just porches lit for evening and neighbors chatting across fences. The RV sat in my driveway, right where it belonged. I'd added a new coat of sealant and even installed a solar panel on the roof. It wasn't just a vehicle anymore. It was a marker, a quiet, stubborn monument to the line we refused to let them cross. I stepped inside, grabbed a cold bottle from the minifridge, and sat in the recliner with the door open. From here, I could see the Harlow's porch light flicker on, and Amir's blue workbench light glowing faintly through his garage window. We hadn't set out to make a point. We just refused to be lied to. But in doing so, we reminded a lot of people that power only works when no one questions it. And we'd made sure those questions would never be ignored again.